everyone. I'm Kyle Hanniman. I'm Professor Kyle Hanniman. I'm the undergraduate chair in political studies here at Queen's. I'm happy to have with me Cathy Keates, the director of career services at Queen's. We realize that students have a lot of questions about jobs this summer and beyond. And Cathy is here to help answer some of these questions during these very difficult and uncertain times. So thank you very much, Cathy, for being here.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, great. Okay, so the first question is the biggest question of them all. Are there any jobs?
Yes, well, the short answer is yes, and so that's the good answer too. The longer, fuller answer is, of course, a lot more complicated than that. We've certainly seen, as many students I know and new grads have experienced, that some jobs have been negatively impacted and certain industries and sectors are certainly struggling. But at the same time, we're seeing that there are areas that need people. There's quite a wide range of what those are, whether they're of interest to any particular individual, but there are lots of things that have either moved remote or because they can be delivered remotely and are needed right now, they're growing, like some of the e-commerce and things like that. And then, of course, we're seeing some needs in some of the frontline areas as well that are actually responding specifically in research and service delivery, responding specifically to the pandemic as well. And just the last thing that I'll say to that is that, I mean, it can be easy to get caught up in, there's a lot around how many jobs are going and what that looks like. But it's really important to remember that each of us as an individual needs one job, right? We don't need huge growth necessarily. We need one job and figure out how to get that.
Sure. And how do we know what jobs are out there? How do we get that information?
Yeah. So I think this is where the skills that students have learned from a poli-sci degree, and any other really Queen's degree too, are really useful to answer this question for yourself, which is the research skills and figuring out what are the trends, what's going on, and then how do I uncover information about what's happening, not just necessarily in general, but in the fields of interest to you. Right? Because everyone's looking for a specific, unique kind of opportunity related to their skills and interests. And so you can do that kind of research, and we can talk more about how that looks too. But one of the things we're trying to do in career services is we're pulling together, and we'll have some more things posted next week around some of the areas that are actually growing or in need of people right now. We have our main My Career job posting portal, which I suspect a lot of students are familiar with. It's where part-time jobs and on-campus jobs and after graduation jobs are posted. We are getting new postings actually every day, which is fantastic. But there's a lot more going on than just that too. And so we're compiling some information about, for example, particular company success stories like Shopify, which is an e-commerce kind of place that is now bigger than the Royal Bank of Canada with all of the new traffic for small businesses, and they're hiring across disciplines and degrees, and there's a lot of success stories like that.
Okay, that's great to hear. And what about finding jobs during this pandemic?
Yeah, so it really is the same process as any time. It's just that I think right now there's probably a lot more anxiety. It's going to need to be fully virtual as opposed to some of the things that we might have done in person before. But the key things to find a job at any time are really research and networking. So starting with who are you, what are you most looking for? And then how do you do the research and build your network into those specific sectors or organizations that are of interest to you? And so networking really looks like identifying people of interest, talking to them about the kind of work they do, about their organization, and seeing what's happening there and finding opportunities through that.
Okay. So another question that I'm sure is on the mind of a lot of students here is what kind of jobs are available to political studies students. And so I'll take this one. Yeah. So like a lot of social science programs, we don't train you for a specific job. What it is we try to do is provide you with a broad range of critical thinking skills, writing skills, communication skills. They're going to appeal to a broad range of sectors and postgraduate programs. We did a survey of some of our graduates a few years ago and found that a very large number of them wound up in four very broad sectors: public administration, legal services, education, and financial services. Those are very broad categories. There's all sorts of different jobs within those, and there are a lot of other possibilities too. So, for example, some of our graduates have wound up in public office, some working in media and public relations. Another thing we found is that most of our students end up doing some kind of postgraduate work. That could be a master's in public policy, public administration. Some of them might go on to do an MA or PhD, political science, MBA, college diploma, and law school is another really big one for us. And we do our best to prepare students for those programs. And again, that really comes down to trying to develop those broad transferable skills. So, Cathy, in this environment, I think a lot of students are going to feel pretty stressed about their job prospects, and they may find it difficult to remain calm when there's just so much we don't know. And maybe a question is, what should their next steps be?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe I'll respond with two pieces to that. Like, one is I think it's great that we're talking about that too, because job search at any time is difficult, right? It means putting yourself out there. It's uncertain along the way. Usually we're going to get some no's along the way to our yes as well. So it's working through all of that. Job search during a pandemic adds a whole other layer of complexity. Our life circumstances, our home circumstances can make it more challenging as well. So, in general, I'd say there's two parts to that. One is really developing your job search toolkit and learning about how to do networking well, being able to speak to your skills and what you have to offer an employer, practicing your interviewing, all kinds of things that career services, we have workshops for, we have one-on-one appointments, and I really encourage, that build that skill set to give you the confidence and skills to move forward. And then the other piece at the same time is just the general paying attention to your overall health. Right. And that, as I say, job search is a stressful time. Add on top of that to all of the other things. And so thinking about what's within your circle of influence and the things that aren't, within your influence are your skills, are the amount of time you spend on things, are the connections that you make and the resources that you draw on. Those are all things that you can do to help yourself always feel a sense of momentum and moving forward. And then paying attention to how you're doing broader than that. So are the exercise, the sleeping, the wellness things. And so, athletics and recreation has this great series of online videos for if you want to stay active. Our student wellness services is still fully functioning and offering all sorts of virtual supports. So for any of the broad range of being healthy through this time, Queen's still has the same kind of range of things that we do, and everyone's pivoted to make sure that those things are available at a distance.
Okay, great. Now, Cathy, a word you used in there was networking.
Yeah.
Now, networking can be a very hard thing to do. It can be a very scary thing to do. It's not something a lot of students have a lot of experience at. What advice would you give to them with respect to networking?
Yeah, so networking is both possibly the number one most critical thing to do in our job searches and career development, and possibly the number one most scary thing to do in our job searches and career development. And so the key things I think are that one is that we often approach networking as if it's asking for something. And we can be really hesitant to go out constantly asking for things from people, but really networking is about creating relationships and a dialogue. And there are a lot of people who are really interested in networking with you. And so a couple of tips around networking I would share. One would be think about who's already in your network you can start with, right? They're probably a little bit easier than reaching out to someone you've never met before. The other is that a technique that students find really, really helpful in networking that gives you a bit of a structure to do this, because often we hear, but what would I even say? What's the conversation supposed to be about? What am I doing this networking for? Is something called information interviews. And some students and grads might be familiar with this already. It's a very basic idea. It's not a job search interview where they're interviewing you. It's actually you interviewing someone who does the kind of work you think you would like to do, and you use them as a source of information for your research to learn more about what's that work like, what were the skills you needed to get in there, what kind of organizations have you worked for, could you work for, what kind of advice would you give to me for someone who's starting out in this field, are there other connections you can make for me so I can move that along. And then, so two other quick things about networking. One is that we have a Queens only networking group in LinkedIn. It's called Queens Connects. It is Queens alumni and other friends and supporters of Queens who have joined in there to be a resource to current Queens students and new graduates who have questions about their career. So that should be it's like meant to be a more safe place to ask those questions before you might want to go broader, but use Queens alumni who want to be there for you. And also our office offers a networking workshop. And it's going to help you get through, like, what does it look like? What are your networking skills? And then we have some specifically on using LinkedIn as well.
Okay, great. And Cathy, what about financial supports beyond jobs?
Yeah, so what's been great is we've seen the federal government announce financial supports, and this is going to be recorded, so I'm not going to mention specific things right now because they're changing regularly, which is fantastic. So what I'll say is that the best way for students and new grads to figure out and stay on top of those is that on the Queen's Student Awards website and on the website of Career Services, we've got a link to the update where the information keeps being updated about those new benefits and different options that you can access.
Okay, great. And Cathy, do you have any message for any other messages for students as we wrap up?
Well, I'm looking forward to any questions that students have too. And I guess like the big thing that I would say is that job search is a skill. We're not born knowing how to do it. It's something just like many other skills that we actually need to put time into learning and practicing. And so I just want to make sure that folks know that that is exactly why my team exists. We are at the university to support students in both the thinking about what do I want to do, where do I want to go with this, and making great choices for you. And then we also help you with the how do I get there.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Cathy. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.